What industry is a lot more dark and sinister than most people realize? The tomato industry. I went to a lecture for extra credit in college on the history of the tomato. I was expecting to hear how people used it and where people started growing them and what not. What I got was essentially a full season of The Sopranos. Extortion, murder, blackmail, vandalism, you name it, the tomato industry was rife with the worst shit. The charities that raise awareness can go suck on a large sack of shit. How low. Recently, a charity did a fun run to aid breast cancer in my local area. How? My aunt, whose daughter died of breast cancer, ran it, hoping the money she raised would be useful to someone. She raised a modest herself, and the event overall raised another check. Turned out the charity the money went to was only for awareness, with 5% actually going to help charities that deal with supporting people with breast cancer. Most of the money went to fund the event and the board of directors, who took a 40% cut of the proceeds themselves. Surprised I've not seen charity sector funding fraud, mistreatment and underpayment of staff, and focusing more on per than actually doing anything of substance are commonplace. Real estate. I'm a copywriter for us real estate corporation and can't wait to get the fuck away from them. Disgusting industry. At Ridgie worked for a 40-person office. Not an agent, but office support. And holy shit, 10% of them made up 50% of my problems. Unfilled paperwork, picky demands, I'm late doing this, and now it's your problem attitudes. Out of that off, at best, 1 in 4 were decent people with enough work coming in to make it. A few others were decent people who were struggling, and at least half of them could barely operate the multiple listing system database that they all used. The level of incompetence was staggering. Really, folks, if you're getting a realtor, check after them. And if you don't like the one you have as part of a larger firm, talk to the lead broker in the office. They'd rather switch you to another realtor than lose your business. Now I need to pay my bills. Academia. Abuse. Exploiting young, ambitious people. Nepotism. Inefficient allocation of resources. Yep. Family friend got his EHE and was excited to start his career in university research and teaching. He lasted about 3 years before he was burned out from the nepotism and backstabbing. He went into public research for about the next 15 years, but got tired of everything being contingent on the next grant. He is now happily self-employed. He said if he had to do it over again, he would have stopped at his master's degree and just gone into private industry straight away. He would have gotten paid more, at better job security and a better working environment. The fashion industry. They rely on third world factories to make their products and pay them pittance. Then sell their products on for 10 times the price they gave the salary for their staff and factory workers. Real modelling not being influencer lol. I dated a model a few years ago. Her agency put her up in an apartment in Nick. She had a pretty good run, but after a year or so they chewed her up and spit her out. Her look was getting old and they got their use out of her. He ended up back home with nothing to show for it. That's when I met her. We were dating for about a month when she asked if I knew how she could get some painkillers. I was pretty shocked and didn't know why she would be asking me. Apparently, while modelling, of course eating was highly frowned upon. She and many others replaced eating with some addiction, alcohol, drugs, etc. She would get the occasional out in a magazine, but she said most of her time was spent fighting off advances from slime balls in the industry. The next time I saw her was when I visited her in the hospital. She was having severe problems with opioid withdrawal. I hope she's doing well these days. As someone who works in public libraries, there is some gloom and doom that comes with the industry of them. For starters, especially in big cities, public library workers are often left to be a whole list of things they were neither trained nor hired to do. As a place where you can just exist for no cost, it attracts many people experiencing homelessness. From my experience, I'd say about 90% of them are non-issues. They'll sit in a chair or at a computer, mind their own business, and then leave without issue. The other 10%, however, can be absolutely disruptive. Rampant drug use, people irrationally angry, and people experiencing extreme mental crises are commonplace. Another issue public libraries face is funding. Libraries are funded by either a county or a city. Some local governments understand and appreciate what a library brings to their community, while others think it's a waste of money. Many libraries have to fight tooth and nail to get scraps to barely pay their employees and keep buying books. I got an email from a library director in the same system I'm in asking other directors how much they get paid, as their library board didn't believe she did her part-time worth of work. Speaking of, most library jobs are underpaid. Many require a master's degree, but only pay in the $30 arc range. And then more recently you see libraries being attacked and vilified by both their communities and even library boards. Book challenges are at an all-time high, and many library staff have received threats for having books in their collections. But I do agree with you that libraries are fucking awesome and do have cool employees. Casinos. They set up the facade that everybody is having a great time, but they are experts in psychological manipulation and are taking advantage of every move you make. Reality is fundamentally manipulated at every turn. Truly dark and sinister. The art world, by which I mean the high-end institutional gallery art world, Geckocean, Marybone, etc. I grew up in that world, and the amount of shitty exploitation that exists at every level would astonish you. I could write a book. My advice to any young artist would be to make art for yourself first, and to not chase mainstream success. It's not worth it. Healthcare, particularly Big Pharma. Look up the Merck scandal with Vioxx. Merck fabricated a journal to hide the side effects of Vioxx, which was actually responsible for causing tens of thousands of heart attacks. Big Pharma ultimately cares about money, not health. This is the correct answer. Government regulations all happened for a reason. Every response in this thread can be boiled down to this is what happens when we deregulate industries and let capitalism police itself. Rehab for drugs and alcohol. I was just talking about this with a friend of mine. Her family member desperately needs residential treatment for alcoholism. The rehabs that take her public insurance have long waitlists and won't let people smoke cigarettes, so it's an uphill battle to get someone into one of those and to convince them to go. Trying to kick more than one addiction at once is extremely rough. She started looking for other options. The cheapest she could find in our area was Irk a month. Most expensive was Irk a month for a 3-month treatment course. So now she has her very high risk, volatile family member crashing on her couch while they try to figure out a way to get them into the care they desperately need. I'm going to say finance, but not for the reason most people think. I work in trading, and my colleagues are some of the smartest people on the planet. Former chemists, physicists, virologists, aerospace engineers, statisticians, materials scientists, and etc. They all get burnt out barely able to keep their research going and being for grant money. Then they get recruited into financial firms to do the same kind of work they enjoy, but get paid X or even X. They don't have to deal with customers, and they see direct indicators of the quality of their work. Finance takes people who could be changing the world for better, and once they cross the event horizon there's no going back. The other half of the problem is how difficult it is to get funding for research to improve the world, but finance is the black hole from which there is no escape. The video game industry. All you see as a consumer is a fun game, some big publishers and perhaps a few interviews with devs telling you how proud they are of Element C or the game in general. Reality is that most those projects live off constant pressure on the devs, and a lot of it. The publisher sets a date. There are millions of dollars going into it, including investments by stakeholders who want to be satisfied. Most of the times those release dates are unrealistic to say the least. This leads to a ton of pressure on the devs, working way over time and still not being able to really put out the work that would have to be done in order to put out a complete game in the end. That's also one of the reasons why so many games nowadays release unfinished or full of bugs. Are pushing the game out before it's finished due to unrealistic release dates set to satisfy investors. If the game is still a success, devs go right back to work with new contracts. If it flops, the work on that game gets dropped, and you only had to pay like half of the work done by the devs because you released the game half-baked. Shipping industry, along with many different commodities. Oh, you got a vessel to take your purchased cargo from some third world shithole? Gotta bribe the port staff or your vessel gets delayed indefinitely. Or the port staff simply siphons your bunker fuel while docked and sells it back to Ultima. You sold a cargo basis certain specifications with a lab doing independent testing upon discharge to determine the exact specs for payment settlement. Guess who's bribing that lab? For the US market, there are many additives that are prohibited from being added to gasoline to improve its octane rating as they are deemed too polluting to the environment. Many us gasoline blenders buy large volumes of them anyway. Why? For selling into the Latin American market.